All right, we are live, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Title Pending, Matteo Heilig and I's show where we talk about sports and whatever else is on our mind.
I
Today,
guess we're live from somewhere in the Nevada desert, halfway between
that's true,
Los
between
Angeles
halfway
and
between Venice, California, and Salt Lake City, Utah. It's going to be a beautiful, beautiful time. So I'm Alex or Todd. With me is Matteo Heilig, as always. And Matteo is going to start us off with our first topic.
Well, first of all, the goal of this sports show is to be the third best sports show in existence. So we're looking to unseat everybody except for was it First Take or whatever the Shannon Sharp and Skip Bayless one is, and then obviously there's no dethroning the Jim Rome show. But
well, honestly, I think when I was thinking about it earlier today, about what we're trying to like emulate, for me, I think PTI. I mean, those guys are great.
Boring.
See, anyway, we'll get to it. What we're trying to go for is non-inflammatory rhetoric.
Oh, then nobody's going to listen. Nobody's going to listen.
There's no being incensed out of our minds. The guys on PTI aren't incensed out of their minds. Stephen A. Smith looks like his head's about to pop off every 5 minutes.
He's a bad example, but a much better example is Shannon Sharp, because he's got as much pressure going inside of him as Stephen A. Smith, but his head is not about to explode. That pressure is controlled and regulated.
So that's good.
Neither of us have that ability, though, so we're gonna have to do that in other ways.
That is true. So start us off, Matteo. What are we talking about first?
We're going to start with what I think is the best sport out there these days, though it's not on a perfectly upward path, and that's the NBA.
The association. Okay.
Yeah, the association. I'd say its potion is also its poison. The reason the NBA is so good is they take care of the players. Everybody's free. But sometimes you can't give people too much freedom, as we've seen in this election. And I think that was that was displayed when Kevin Durant decided to jump ship from OKC.
I take it you're not a fan of that move, Matteo?
Not at all.
I
echo the sentiments of Barkley and everybody who's been trashing him. Though I don't care about how weak he is. I mean, that's not something that bothers me. He can be weak. What bothers me is that we had a great rivalry to look forward to every single year for the next who knows how long between the Thunder and the Warriors, and that was at least 3 games during the regular season, must-watch games, and then who knows, maybe 7 games in the playoffs each year. And now the Thunder have been relegated to probably meddling in the lower to bottom playoff bracket of the West. And
yeah, I mean, realistically, I mean, as much as I love Russell Westbrook, they have a tall order ahead of them. Basically, they need to get somebody who can like shoot the ball from more than 10 feet away from the basket, which is difficult for them. I love Steven Adams. He's great. He's improving drastically, which is awesome. I just don't know that they have any. I mean, Victor Oladipo's all right, but they need better shooters. I mean, pretty much a couple games I've watched, it seems like their strategy is let's just clog the paint, and they won't be able to do anything to us. And it's partially true. So, although I do like the new Sabonis, if he's half as good as his dad, he's going to be amazing for the next 40 years. So they have a good cornerstone there. As we saw with Arvydas Sabonis, he played productively into his, 70s, I think? Into his 70s. So
yeah, you can still see him in China.
Yeah. If his son is half the athlete his father was, they have a good cornerstone there. But yeah, no, I mean, I agree about Kevin Durant. What really chagrined me about the whole thing was that I'm an anti-establishment kind of person. I like when the underdog wins. I don't like the chalk just winning out everything. And basically now we have I mean, shoot, if we didn't all think the Warriors were just going to win at the beginning of the year anyway because they're stacked, well, now they're even more stacked on paper. Part of me hopes and prays that doesn't come to fruition in the long term, but I don't know. It's just boring. It's like the NBA, I think, has it in their best interest to veto some of that kind of stuff because it does not make me want to watch any Warriors game unless you're a Warriors fan. Like, it's to the point where you don't even want to root against fans.
Them. Yeah, I mean, I hope that's how I feel as well. Like, in theory, you'd want your villains are a good thing because people want to go see them get beat. But in this case, if nobody cares, that should hurt the ratings. But I don't think that's happening. I think people, because even though it's not a good basketball rivalry, they have the petty rivalry of, oh, what's Russ going to do when he sees KD again?
Yeah, I mean, I don't even think, but I think people tune into
be about close games.
They tune into Steph Curry and the Warriors because that's the new, apparently people love Steph Curry for some reason. I don't really get it.
You can't knock people for loving him. He's fine. He's a good player.
Yeah.
He's doing stuff that nobody's done before, but yeah, I mean, it's a stylistic thing. Yeah. And it's a kind of it's a fad, hot. Everybody's loved. There's been, Kevin Durant was the best player in the league for a while. Everybody likes to jump ship every now and then. We can't just celebrate LeBron for being the best for the last 12 years. What is it?
I mean, yeah, I agree. Well, so okay. Any last things? Yeah, for like a hot minute. I still can't believe he won that MVP. Like, did he just play that well, or were people like, "Yo, we need to give it to somebody besides LeBron James"?
He had a good year, but he's fragile. He just put it all out there, and
he's a China doll.
Unfortunately, that's all he got out of it was that MVP. Unfortunately for him, I would people should just not tolerate bad basketball. I would implore people to only watch good games. I mean, I wouldn't even.
Well,
I don't want to punch
Thunder
for losing their best player, but people shouldn't be watching the Warriors just blow teams out. That shouldn't be.
I agree.
Exciting.
But I think the good news is that for the NBA, in terms of entertaining basketball, there's like so much talent in the league right now. And whether it's like teams who can actually win games or not, you have really entertaining games. I mean, you look at young teams like the Timberwolves, like the Jazz, like the Lakers now that Kobe's gone. And like these are legitimately entertaining teams to watch. The Celtics are pretty entertaining to watch. I hear like Isaiah Thomas just went off in the fourth quarter the other day and just like scored him a bunch load of points. Apparently Kemba Walker on the Pacers is doing some really cool stuff. So, I mean, that's the good news, right? I mean, the Rockets, James Harden, possible MVP if he keeps it up.
See, that stuff just doesn't entertain me. I like to see I only care if they're contenders. The lowest contender to me is the Grizzlies.
Oh, dude, yeah. Not this year, though. The Grizzlies have fallen apart. The fact that Vince Carter is like single-handedly holding the Grizzlies afloat does not bode well for the Grizzlies.
Last night or 2 nights ago.
Yeah, but I also think the fact that people are saying like the Clippers are our next contender is really, really sad because we've seen time and time again that the Clippers just cannot get it done. People need to just get off of that bandwagon.
The Grizzlies are built for the playoffs. If they can stay healthy and if they can recover from paying Mike Conley and Chandler Parsons so much money.
I just can't believe they paid Chandler Parsons that much. Mike Conley's a good player, and you need a good point guard. But Chandler Parsons.
Is he a top 10 point guard? He's definitely not a top 5 point guard.
Well, I don't know. You have to run through them.
You got Russ, Curry, Kyrie.
Yeah, well, I don't. Is Curry actually the point guard?
Lillard.
Yeah, Lillard I do love me some Lillard. Chris Paul. Yeah, I guess that's probably about it. Well, the Milwaukee Bucks, they're another exciting team. I love watching them. Have you watched the Bucks play?
Not this year.
Oh, it's good stuff with the Greek Freak. But anyway, yeah, I don't know. I hope I hope the Warriors don't just, sweep everybody in the playoffs.
It looks like It looks like
Yeah.
they won't. I don't know if this trade it might be too much offense, not enough defense. There's already trade rumors.
Yeah.
They're
Well,
not blowing people out the way they used to.
yeah. I mean,
They
I
may
think
have
part
lost.
of it is like what we
They
saw
didn't
with the
just.
big three when they came together. And with the Heat is you just have sometimes people take a while to mesh. You know, it takes a while for a culture to get together. You know, especially when you have someone like Kevin Durant coming in. Yeah, I don't know. I think
The
it'll
Heat
take
is.
a time.
It
Some
did.
time.
Yeah. Looking back, I don't know how they lost to the Mavericks. I don't know how that happened. They were so much better.
Because I guess Harrison Barnes is a legit basketball player now.
No, I'm talking about how the Heat lost to the Mavericks in that one series.
Oh, in that one series, Dirk, baby.
Dirk, yeah, I guess. I guess I
Dude,
just
that
have
team was pretty good. Like, you had Jason Terry, I think, still, and he was just.
like a fading Jason Terry or a prime Jason Terry.
Oh, he was fading. I mean, I think he was like. Most of his shots were probably like technically from the bench. I think he was like just got up for them.
They had good rim protection too. They had
Tyson.
Was it
Tyson Chandler, and Dirk, and some other pieces. They had Vince. No, maybe I can't remember. He played for the Mavericks for a while. I can't remember where Vince Carter has gone. That man is.
He'll always be just Air Canada to me.
He is proving to be half man, half amazing, because the fact that he is having a career this long is very impressive.
I wonder if if he didn't punish himself the way Kobe did, or if people just built that way. It's like, what can you count on for LeBron or for Durant? Are some players worth a max deal when they're 35 and looking to renegotiate, and are some just over the hill?
That's good. That's a good question.
I'd say they're over the hill. Nobody's.
Yeah.
I mean, he's not Air Canada. He's still a decent player. But
right. Okay. So I pulled up the 2011 or 10-11 Dallas Mavericks championship roster, and we have. Well, I'm just going to go off the notable people: Corey Brewer,
decent defender.
Caron Butler. How that guy has as many rings as he does is unbelievable.
Wow.
Right. Tyson Chandler, Brendan Haywood as the backup.
I don't even know who that
Jason
is.
Kidd.
Jason Kidd. All right. So
yeah.
some
Sean Marion.
Oh yeah, Sean Marion. That's what they.
And
that's what over the.
And Peja Stojakovic.
Did he play?
Or
did
maybe.
he just will the balls in? Might want to do something.
And Jason Terry.
And the Jet. Try just a quick aside here to save bandwidth. You might want to try turning your camera off. I just did that, and it seems to have helped the voice quality.
Oh, there we go. All right, camera's off.
Oh, yeah, you sound much better. Maybe it's just because I don't see your face, or maybe the bandwidth has.
Cold-blooded Mateo.
No, it happened when I turned my camera off too.
Fair enough.
All right, moving out of the NBA, I think we've covered most of that. We'll touch back.
We may come back. Yeah.
I want to talk about just the broader theme is villains in sports, but I think politics plays into that. I like when they put themselves out there. I think that's a good move by any athlete who does that, because
play the heel.
Yeah, just I mean, even if whatever it is, super liberal, super conservative, hateful, not hateful, I don't think it gets people to not watch. I think it gets people to root against you, which is just as good as rooting for you. That's the only reason I watch MMA.
Yeah, but if you're a superstar, so that's one thing if you're like a Dennis Rodman role player. But if you're a superstar, as Michael Jordan said, Republicans buy shoes too. So I don't really know how I think it is hard for someone who like wants to be that superstar status and wants to show like, hey, yeah, people are going to buy my shoe. You can't really be a polarizing character unless people just don't care. I guess my main thing is if you look who they're like selling the shoes to, they're not selling the shoes to like old white dudes. So really the idea that I think they have a little bit more leeway now than maybe they did when Michael Jordan was in his prime.
The old white dudes could be buying their kids the shoes. I mean, you can't.
Yeah, but
I get the shoe. That's a. I didn't think of that. I was just thinking about just watching the games.
right.
But I guess they are businessmen in that sense, and they have to.
Especially those superstars. I mean, guys like Kevin Durant and all those guys. I mean, they all have all these endorsement deals, and yeah, it's one thing if you're Steven Adams, you can have people hate you because it doesn't matter.
Well, even if you're the star, even in football, like Tom Brady, he used to voice his opinion, and people loved him and hated him. And the people who hated him still watched him because they wanted to see him get flattened or they wanted to see him throw a pick.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, he's the cheating too. He didn't lose any viewers because of the cheating.
No,
people just hate him even more. They want.
I think if he was selling, merchandise regularly.
Yeah, I guess football players.
I don't think. No.
They're not as.
I mean, what? I mean, Tom Brady probably has like a watch endorsement, but I don't think anybody who can afford that kind of watch is like, "Ooh, I want to get it because Tom Brady is endorsing it." I think it's just like it's like Roger Federer. Like, are people actually buying Mercedes Benzes because Roger Federer is sponsored by them? No.
They have to be, or else they wouldn't be sponsoring him.
Well, I think they get a return on investment somehow, but I don't think it's.
Yeah, it's by people buying watches or Mercedes or whatever.
Anyway. Yeah, but I think those people aren't quite as easily influenced as like someone buying a pair of sneakers.
Nobody's seeing that ad and jumping to get to the dealership asking for the Roger Federer special.
Right. I guess that's the thing is like with shoes. I mean, I always wanted. I had like Kevin Garnett's shoes when I was in like 6th grade, and because I wanted to be KG, right? But I guess no one's buying a Mercedes because they want to be like Roger Federer. And no one's buying like a Tag Heuer watch because they want to be like Tom Brady. If that's actually who sponsors him. If not, I apologize, Tom and Tag Heuer for.
I don't think
think
you have to apologize to Tag Heuer, and they'll take.
Well, maybe they don't want to be affiliated with Tom Brady.
Maybe.
Anyhow,
but I'm skeptical.
So you were saying about villains. Continue.
Yeah, that's a lot of people root out of love or out of support. A lot of others, like me, root out of hate. I watch. The only reason I watch boxing and MMA is because there's a villain who I want to see his face get pounded in, and unfortunately, that never happens to the villains that I've chosen of Mayweather and McGregor. They are the best, but I'm only watching because they're good, and I want to see them lose because they're such outrageous personalities. Not just outrageous, just I don't know, trashy. But you know what? That's it's working. They're doing it. They should keep doing what they're doing.
Yeah.
Nobody's not watching because of that.
Right, that's true. Although I would say Floyd Mayweather, he goes a little bit beyond like playing a quasi-villain and then doing like things that legally make him like a bad person. Like assaulting his wife and.
Well, people also don't watch him because he has the reputation of just running away and having soft hands, and his fights are boring to the untrained eye.
Yeah. Okay. What's our next topic here?
Football.
Yes. Okay. So I'm taking the point on this one. Unpopular opinion. I've seen it a couple other places, so I'm not the only one who has it. But I think football has lost its luster, really. There's just, I mean, people getting ties, teams. I mean, that one game between the Cardinals and the Seahawks? They're like division rivals, for goodness sake, and they're finishing in a 6-6 tie. Like, come on, guys. No one can tell me that is good football that anybody would want to watch.
The last 2 minutes might have been exciting, but
I guess. But so football games take forever.
Like, yeah, that's what I was going to get at. If it was
there's so many commercial breaks
that took an hour and a half, but when it takes 4 hours, nobody wants to see that.
Yeah, that's just rude. At least like an NBA game, it's moving a little bit, and especially during the regular season, like there aren't that many timeout breaks. But again, maybe the age of like people sitting and watching an entire game, I think it's kind of over.
I don't think so. I think you're mistaken there. I think people
unless you go to like a party. How many do you when you watch NBA games? Are you watching the whole game?
No, but I'm not. I mean, it depends on the game. If it's a good game, I'll try and make a point to watch the whole game. If it's otherwise, just first and fourth.
Other than playoffs, I could not tell you the last time I watched an entire NBA game.
Well, what are we talking? What are we sitting here talking about sports then? To be honest, I watch
no,
the highlights
because I have opinions about it. You watch highlights, right? Exactly.
The other parallel for football is baseball. Like the play, even though it's the most important game of the season, or not even the season, just like coming down the stretch in the playoffs, every game was pushing 4 hours, and that's just too much.
Yeah, I mean,
time and time again.
And the worst is, it's one thing if like the game was actually 4 hours, but it's all the darn TV breaks and the commercials.
It's the pitching changes. We don't need to just let him run out. We've got to put a time limit on pitching changes. Make them be better athletes. Get them to sprint in from the bullpen, throw like 6 pitches, and then carry on.
Yeah, it shouldn't be. We're not talking about baseball. That's like the one rule about this show.
No baseball.
I
we won't talk about
baseball.
Except
unless like Roger Clemens makes a comeback, and then we'll talk about how much of a douche he is. But
we can talk about it in October and early November, but not late November. All right, baseball is off the table. We were talking about it.
Although kudos to the Cubbies. A little friendship history, everybody. Mateo and I actually went to a Cubs game and saw them win, so we got to sing the "Go Cubs Go" song.
Hey Chicago, what do you say?
What do you say? Cubs gonna win today, saying "Go Cubs Go," and in some really likely offensive Midwestern accents. It was a great time. Also fun from that trip to Chicago, I probably tore every ligament in my ankle.
It was worth the view, though. It
was swelled up like a grapefruit. So yeah, the NFL, I think, has a bit of a crisis in terms of people say viewership is down. I just think it's also becoming hard to watch when you see people, particularly quarterbacks, just get annihilated, and especially when you know what CTE does to people.
They've got it easy.
No, next time the Panthers play, watch Cam Newton play. They don't give him any calls, and he basically is just getting mauled by these guys and not even getting any penalties or anything. It's unbelievable. I watched the first game where he got pummeled by the Broncos, and it was legitimately uncomfortable, where I was sitting there like, wow, I feel kind of bad watching this. And I think that's what's going to happen with football going forward, is it's going to become less and less attractive to watch grown men basically give each other brain damage interspersed with commercials.
Yet MMA is a growing sport. So
but you have to admit, Mateo, that there's a ceiling to how much MMA is going to grow.
Absolutely.
Right? Whereas the NFL, if their numbers were to go down to what MMA is at its highest, that would be a disaster for them. They would be ringing the alarm. They cannot go that low in terms of viewership numbers. The NFL is used to making a lot of money by being the most popular sport out there. And I just don't think
they would only be able to support 3 teams if it was down to that that level of viewership. If even. No, they wouldn't you wouldn't be able to support a practice squad on
Well, in 20 years I just don't know that there's even going to be enough people. Well, actually, I don't know.
I don't know. Yeah, it might be that the best athletes are not going to, the parents aren't going to let them play football anymore, and the product's going to get not diluted, but it was just going to decline. It's not going to be as exciting. It's going to be everybody who couldn't play everything else is going to be playing football. Nobody's going to be passing up a baseball career to play football anymore.
Well, stop. I wonder. We know of all these guys who gave up playing baseball to play football. I wonder if anyone did it the other way. Because the list of guys going to play football instead of baseball is very long. You have Ricky Williams, You have, and these are just off the top of my head. You have like Vince Young was a really promising baseball player. Like all these guys, and none of them chose baseball.
When is the trend of
because they don't want to eat hot dogs, while their team is playing. Once I found that out about baseball, I was like, okay, this can't be a real sport. Like I thought like clubhouse was just the name for like the locker room. No, it's like actually where the most players hang out during the game. Now, especially if they're not playing on that certain day.
I thought they just go there to relieve themselves.
I don't know.
But we've agreed not to talk about baseball.
That's right.
Baseball is not supposed to be on the card. So back to football. I think they were definitely too complacent with they were too they got arrogant. They thought that they just had this great product and that they couldn't really do any wrong, and they didn't really do anything to really improve the game. They're trying to expand it to London and Mexico City, but
yeah, so some of those games have been terrible. The London games, because these teams are so jet lagged. Nobody's watching because they're playing at like 6 a.m. Eastern time. And it's just absurd.
They must be paying the fans to come there, right?
Yeah, I can't imagine there are that many fans.
It's like having nobody. If they had a cricket match in Houston, who's going to go to that? Well, Houston's I think you would have in Salt Lake City. How many fans are going to
there's a large refugee population in Salt Lake City, so you might
I'm
getting all
the wrong ones.
If you were in Boise, Idaho, how many people would come?
But Boise's not a metropolis. We got to think of like a metropolis where.
Well, I don't know.
With a low South Asian population.
Anyway, while you think about that, I think another thing we wanted to talk about was politics and sports. Is that correct?
Yeah, we were heading that way, but I guess we like as always got distracted. Mm-hmm. To me, it's just a matter of I like the more polarizing, the better.
Yeah,
I'll root. If somebody shares my views, I'll root for them. It'll be a reason to root for them. And if they don't, I'm not going to boycott them. I'm just going to hope they lose.
So you wouldn't like so let's say it came out tomorrow. Who's your favorite player in the NBA right
now? That's a tough one.
Okay, just give me one, like one where you're like, ooh, I really like watching this guy play.
Kawhi.
Okay. What if tomorrow we find out that like Kawhi is like pro-life? And not just like a little bit pro-life, but like staunchly pro-life.
I don't think we can hypotheticalize on that. I'd have to.
But would you stop rooting for him just because of that?
I don't think so.
Right. But I don't even think for me at least.
But if he wasn't my favorite player, I would root against him even harder because of that.
Because of that? See, I think that's like so it's like disliking people. It's like the whole argument between can you like somebody's art but not them as a person? Like, can you find somebody morally like, so Allen Ginsberg, right, was a beat writer who like killed his wife. I don't obviously advocate for killing one's wife, although in his defense, he was high as a kite on like some crazy 60s drugs when he did it. But still, does that mean that I don't like his art?
No, you're right.
See, my dad refuses to read any Allen Ginsberg book because of that fact. He refuses.
I'm going to backtrack a little bit on my position. If I was ambivalent about Kawhi Leonard, I would still be ambivalent about him on that. But if I had if it was Kevin Durant, who I was starting to have negative thoughts about, it would definitely compound those negative thoughts.
Okay. But what if he were to like...
He was my favorite player. I think he'd still be my favorite player.
What if you found out that like your least favorite player, let's say that's Kevin Durant for right now, for argument's sake. What if you found out he was like, I don't know, he was like he just gave a bunch of money to environmental nonprofits. That
doesn't matter.
That may appeal more to me than you, but
I'd still hate him.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. But no, I mean, I think it is interesting.
But if he was my favorite player, I'd like him even more.
See, so I think there's a different. So in my mind, we have like two types of guys, right? We have the Colin Kaepernick.
You can't buy my allegiance.
Right. We have the Colin Kaepernicks, where I know people are sick and tired of hearing about him, but it just turned up that he did not vote for President of the United States. My problem with that...
Or anything. He could have voted on prison reform. He could have voted on...
Exactly. There are things that honestly could have helped his, especially in the state of California, there are things like you're mentioning right now, like propositions that could have helped his, agenda of bringing down minority injustice and doing some things to make that better. But you have him on one hand. Then you also have Carmelo Anthony, who I think does it in a much smarter way, right? Who...
One of the few things Carmelo Anthony does.
Right. So here's an example of a guy who
scores.
I'm still surprised that I never saw it. I never saw how he was like a top 5 player in the NBA at any point in his career. I really don't see it now. I mean, I just don't understand. Anyway, but that's neither here nor there. But he's doing some really cool things and some really interesting things in terms of, getting people to talk about racial injustice and that kind of stuff in popular culture and in the NBA. And he's taking his position as a role model. Now, none of it's very inflammatory, like Colin Kaepernick's, taking a knee during the national anthem, which I thought was a very good move. And I think it's his right to do that if he's that displeasured. But I don't think the answer to being so disgruntled with your political system is to just put your head in the ground and not vote about it. I mean, that's the same reason I get mad at people who don't vote, no matter who you are. But especially if you're going to be very outwardly vocal about it, it seems unbelievably...
well, you don't get any publicity for voting.
I'm not going to say hypocritical, because we're all hypocritical as human beings, and that's inherent. But I think it's a bit more... misguided. I think to me, it just doesn't compute, if you will.
He was. I mean, maybe he felt that way about the cause, but it's pretty obvious that it was an attention grab.
Yeah.
I mean, I can see how people were offended by it. I wasn't really offended by it. I thought it was fine if he wants to do that. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's other parts of the national anthem that I would protest. Just the fact that, sure, play it on the Super Bowl, but we don't need to hear it for every single game. I think that dilutes it. It's like,
I think it's overplayed. I mean, I think, this may be an unpopular opinion that's going to lose us some listeners or some viewers, however we want to put it. But I think there's just way too much. It's like there's I think we've reached a level of over-patriotism and nationalism that sometimes I feel like I am... people are like judging me for not being as patriotic as them.
I don't. Well, maybe they're. Yeah. I
do. I do. I was at a town council meeting in Salt Lake here, and I didn't stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. And some people were really upset about that. And that whole idea of like, if you're either for us or against us. And I pray that doesn't.
Well, what if you just really hate the Pledge of Allegiance? It's just...
Well, first of all, I went to a French school growing up, so I actually legitimately do not know the Pledge of Allegiance, so I wouldn't be able to pledge allegiance.
Did you sing the whatever, the French?
La Marseillaise? No, we don't. It's not like we do that every day. But apparently,
what about in in the sporting events? If there's a French league basketball game, are they playing that every game?
No. So in France, they only do it during international matches, I believe. I don't think if you just went to like a Paris Saint-Germain versus Lille soccer game that they would be playing La Marseillaise before the game. I could be wrong, but I believe it's only for like international, like if the French soccer team or one of the French teams are playing. But I could be wrong about that.
I think they should do it just at the beginning of the season. That's a celebration, the season starting. And then...
but Mateo, how are we going to support our troops if we can't sing the national anthem?
We're supporting them at the beginning. We're not going to. Nobody's. Do you sing it every day? Every time you should we be singing it every time we wake up in the morning? Like, come on.
Well, yeah, if you're American.
Nobody can do that.
Shifting gears real quick, I want to touch on one more sport that we hadn't talking about. That's tennis. So I don't know if you know, Andy Murray is now the new world number one.
Really?
Took it over from Novak. I don't even know how that happened, really. But my question is the Big Four, well, let's say Big Three. I think people adding Andy Murray to the Big Four, it's kind of an insult to the other three guys, because Andy Murray won like a gold medal because it was in London, and like one Wimbledon title, and all of a sudden he's like part of the Big Four.
But he's British.
Yeah, but he's not that good.
I know Andy Murray lost my. I mean, what little respect.
But anyway,
I had for him
are we?
Was
is it over? Like, are we gonna see? I mean, I think Novak could still win a major, but are Roger Federer and Rafael Nadal pretty much done?
I think so. I think.
Yeah.
I think Nadal more so than Federer, because Federer he's a shot maker. Nadal is more of a grinder.
Right.
And I mean, I think Federer still has a chance at Wimbledon and the U.S. Open, where he can just has, if he can let loose and have a good.
But you see, I mean, what's interesting though is like, so you know, we've seen it in the past, like guys in their twilight and gals in their twilight kind of make a run at like one last master, you know, years after they've won it. And, you know, we still Agassi do it, and Pete Sampras, and those are the two that come to mind.
I think Federer is capable of that. I don't think Nadal.
I just think it's a lot harder now, because you're playing. I think there's so much depth in tennis.
Pete Sampras had to beat Roger Federer when he was in his twilight years.
Yeah, did he really?
Yeah.
Well, they had to be good players, but
Djokovic is 29, so I think it's safe to say he's still going to be around for a few more years.
Yeah, he is. I think, but I mean, you look at it, and so you have guys like, so depending on where you're playing, if you're at a place like, so say, take Wimbledon, for example, right? So there's like, you're going to have to go through, let's list the names of guys who are going to take you to a hard match. You basically have Nishikori, you have Tsonga, who can still play pretty well at a high level, at least for a while.
I don't think those guys are major Wimbledon threats. I think
they are. Well, but here's the thing. Those are the kind of guys that you would meet nowadays. You're meeting them in like the fourth round, right? Where before, that's the kind of guy that you're meeting in the semifinals. But now I think it's so deep, and you're seeing it with these upsets. I mean, you know, Nadal and Federer and even Djokovic now getting upset like in the third round of majors just because they're tired, or they get pushed to 5 sets the night before or 2 nights before, and then they got to come back and play a good player like Joe.
When did Djokovic get knocked out early?
I think this year he I can't remember. I'll look it up. But I think it's that idea that it's hard for them. Like, this is not, there's so much depth in tennis right now. And you look at guys like, you know, every once and again you have Gilles Simon, the French guy who's making it to like a semifinal. Or you have guys like Monfils, who still like has a spark every once in a while. You know, you get these guys. I think there's so much talent and depth. And as we've seen nowadays, players play a lot longer because of the new like conditioning and, you know, food regimens and personal trainers that they didn't have 20 years ago. And you're starting to see it where guys like Gael Monfils, who I think 10 years ago, after the string of bad results he had for like 2 years, that people would have just given up on him, he's now still getting into tournaments and making runs at majors that are disrupting what these other guys are doing and making it hard for him. Because I think, I don't know, I had a friend in Salt Lake here last time I was living here a couple years ago who played tennis at Yale. He was like the Utah champion, played in like the Orange Cup and all these things. And he said the ability difference between all of these top guys is very, very small, right? In terms of abilities, the top 30 are pretty much all within like maybe 1 or 2% of ability of one another. What's the difference is all mental and like swagger, right?
I don't think that's true at all. I think there's stylistic differences.
Well, okay, there's stylistic differences, but I think the other thing that so much that comes into tennis is like self-doubt. You cannot be a good player if you have self-doubt. So for a guy who, I mean, you saw it with Juan Martín del Potro and the run he made this year, right? Like he came back out of nowhere. That guy was left for dead because he had like all these wrist issues, and then he came back from the wrist issues. And even for a couple of years when he was like quote unquote fully healthy, he mentally wasn't there because he didn't believe that he could beat these people. And once he had like one good game against somebody that he used to be able to beat, he's like, okay, I'm back. And now he was just like tearing it up this summer. For a guy that was like, his last good result was literally in like 2009. That's 7 years ago. That's an eon in professional tennis.
That is an interesting point. I never thought of it that way.
And so I think once these guys, and you see the same thing with Monfils this summer, he made a run at a couple majors. It's like once these guys get back into it mentally, I think they're able to start going in because those shots are there for them. They can still hit the mechanics of those shots. They're still feeling good. Their bodies aren't breaking down because they have, masseuses and, stretching regimens afterwards that they didn't have 20 years ago.
I think there's a bigger difference than you're letting on to, because maybe.
But so I also think what's happening, so that coupled with the fact that the game has become much more global, so it's not just, the United States and France and England and like maybe one other country that has good players. We have players from all over the world now. I think the talent pool is really, really deep, and that makes it really hard. You saw Federer, there were a couple times, the last couple Wimbledons and US Opens, he looked so good in like the early rounds, right? And he looked like his old self. And I'm a huge Federer fan. I'm rooting for him to make it the entire way every time. And then you see, as he gets kind of into the later rounds, he just starts sputtering. And I think you see some of these younger guys start getting a little bit of confidence when they win 1 or 2 sets off Roger. They're like, okay, I can do this now. And I don't think I think physically he's not there anymore where he can he's not hitting every shot. And these guys, these new guys, these young guys, they can hit every shot.
What do you mean hit every shot?
Well, they can. I think their technical ability is really. I don't think the technical ability gap is very large anymore. I think you have a lot of guys. You have a lot of guys and gals who have really, really good skills. And what it takes to be a good professional nowadays is more mental than it is having the technique and being an all-star. Because all these guys, I think, are all-stars on the practice court. But then it becomes that mental game of, okay.
It's always been that way. So you're telling me that people don't have weak backhands anymore? Nobody's got a suspect serve or
no, I mean, they do.
Volley game. I think that's still in play. I think there's large differences in in their forehand and backhand ability, in every ability. Some of them can scramble much better than others. Like Federer can't scramble anymore. That's why he struggled so much at the French Open.
Yeah,
he was never a great scrambler. He was all about shot making.
Yeah, I mean, I think. Yeah, I agree. But I do think there is a difference in terms of, I think it's the depth, right? Before, I think the guys who were, in like basically positions 20 through 64, or heck, I mean, there were times in tennis where it's like, and again, it's hard to know whether that was just because Nadal and Roger Federer were so dominant. But when they were like in their prime, when it was basically them two meeting in the finals every time before Djokovic and Murray were like real presences, I mean, there was nobody that could even come close to holding a light towards them. And I think it's the depth now is a lot better. And now you have it basically 1 through 20, where it's not really an upset anymore if a guy doesn't make it to the top. I think the women's game is a little bit different. I don't think there's quite as much depth. But you look at the men's game, and it's like, if basically once you get into the 4th round, I don't feel, looking at results, that it's that much of an upset anymore, because either these guys are like new guys who are in the top 20 who haven't made it to a semifinal or final of Grand Slam yet, but they're playing really well. And it's like, oh yeah, that guy's really good. Like there's a couple guys from Australia, Nishikori. I think they're all in that realm. But then you have guys like we were talking about earlier, like Joe Wilfred Tsonga and Gael Monfils and Gilles Simon, who like these are guys who have made it to semifinals or finals of Grand Slams. And I wouldn't be surprised if those guys upset, an Andy Murray or a Nishikori in like the fourth round. And so I think it's much tougher to make those runs, especially if you have a hard draw, right? Which I think I mean, I don't know. You look at like a number one seed's draw now, and it's not easy.
If you look at Djokovic's last 4 years, 5 years, 6 years, since 2010, Djokovic has the worst result he's had was a third round loss at Wimbledon. Every other year, he's made at least the quarterfinals.
Right, but he's also the men's number one, Matteo. That's what you expect out of a men's number one. Oh, and I'm not even mentioning Stan Wawrinka, who's won, a couple. I mean,
where did he come from? He's been around for a while, and he was always the other Swiss guy, way under.
Right, he was always the other Swiss guy, and then I think what happened is there was that one French Open.
Maybe he was just cooling it and waiting for Federer to fade. And
no, I think for him it was a mental thing. I think it was, hey, I can, like, once you beat one of those guys, because I think, and I read an article in the New York Times about like the Big Four and whether it was over or not, and this was
we just lost a bunch of viewers there.
Oh yeah. I think what a lot of guys mentioned is once you do beat one of those guys, or even once you bring them to like the fifth set, and you feel like it could go either way, like Wawrinka and a couple other guys were like, it just changes your mindset completely because you're like, oh, I can beat these guys. As before, it was like, oh man, I'm gonna have to face Roger Federer this game. Like, there's no way I'm gonna beat him because for a while he was just so invincible. But anyway,
but we segued, but it segued from Federer's invincibility to Nadal's relative invincibility to Djokovic's. There's always, I think,
but I think that's ending.
The difference between 1 and 3.
I don't know whether that's going to be. I don't know.
I don't see anybody on the future, but I didn't see Djokovic coming. I didn't believe in the.
You didn't? Well, anyway, we'll see. I think the other thing is there's basically like a basket of guys who I think could be like the next Federer.
I think it would be interesting for somebody, and this is our last point because we've been talking. Nobody wants to hear about tennis.
Especially not in November. In the summer, it might be one thing, but mid-November tennis talk is a bit.
I would like to see somebody, maybe me, go down and kind of quantify the relative domination through each era. Was there ever just like a freewheeling era where it was almost not democratic, but somebody knew, or they were winning in equal batches. Nobody was obviously dominating.
I think the short answer is we're getting the closest to it now, and that's just because I think it's a democratization of tennis. I think our generation of like born in like the late 80s, early 90s, tennis courts were ubiquitous in like first world countries. It didn't matter, and I think it didn't matter what country you came from anymore. You could come from Japan, there were tennis courts. You could come from Serbia. I mean, you see a bunch of Eastern Bloc guys. And now that we're getting into the lower, basically kids who are younger than us, you're going to see it even more. And I just think that's the way it is. They can watch on YouTube, how to have a really good stroke.
Yeah, it could be. I don't know if that's necessarily a good thing. It's good for them, everybody having a good stroke. But for the viewer, I think we like to. It's nice to see somebody somewhat dominate. We don't want it to be boring, but to have something to make it interesting. If it's a new guy,
all right.
Yeah.
Well,
I think that's true of every sport. I think it's always good to have not quite equality, and to be striving.
No, but I think knocking
the champions off their pedestal.
Yeah, and I think the better that the product becomes from top to bottom, the better it is for fans. Because now it's legitimately entertaining to watch a third round match. That was not the case 5 years ago.
Could be. Insights
Anyhow.
from Alex and Mateo.
That's right. We're going to try and do this once a week, and we'll see where we get. Who knows? It'll be entertaining. Thanks for tuning in, Justin and Dad. And we'll see you next time.
Ciao.
Thank you, Mateo.
And thank you all.